In today's video, we're going to cover the basics about sources of knowledge, the scientific method, and ethics. My first question to you is, how do you know what you know? There are really four main methods where someone can come to know about something. And the first one we'll talk about is called the method of tenacity. And in this method, people just know something to be true. It's true because it's true, and I've always known it to be true. And what happens here is that therapists will latch onto a dogma. So they will have something that they just believe because they believe it and they've always believed it. It's often referred to as the pit bull mentality, where they just hold true to that concept and that circular argument. And the problem with that is really that there is no rational thought. There's no reason to know or to stick to that so closely. And there's no evidence to back that up. The next method is called the method of authority. And jokingly, an authority or an acknowledged expert has been defined as anyone greater than 200 kilometers away from home with a PowerPoint presentation. But really what this is how you learn in school, right? You hear this from me, an authority. In the classroom, I've taught you something, and that's how you know that it's true, right? In some cases, teachers actually may show you the evidence behind it, so that there's some sort of reason, but you can always find evidence to support anything. So the problem here is that there's no real peer review. You're just hearing what I've decided to tell you, and unless I give you my resources to back that up, there's really no evidence that that is actually the truth. The next method is called the a priori method, and this method is often defined as it stands to reason that. So it stands to reason, I have an idea or I have a rational thought that this phenomenon should be true because of this is what my reasoning is, my rationale. What the challenge is here, well, there's really no data to back it up necessarily, right? They haven't actually done the empirical studies or provided that data in order to say, in fact, this hypothesis is true. So finally, the method we come to then is the method of science. And the method of science is really a scientific way of going through improving those hypotheses, right? It's what's published in journals, in textbooks, and there's a component of peer review built in, right? So there's someone that reviews that and states that this is actually good source of knowledge or good controlled research. So it's systematic, it's controlled, it's empirical, and it's critical. Someone has reviewed it. What's really important here is that we know that this is how we learn about professional things that are going to apply to our clinic. So let's take an in-depth look at the scientific method. What is it? It's really a process. And the process begins with a problem or a question. You then move to doing some sort of literature review about that problem. So you may actually use the physical library, not likely. You might use some online resources. And from that literature review, you generate a hypothesis, or you have some sort of rationale or a priori thinking about what that problem may be and what the solution to that would be. You then come up with a method or a blueprint of how you're going to study this. Right? And that includes your sample, your design, your methods, and your statistical analysis that you've got planned to carry out this research. The next step is to go through ethical review, where someone is actually going to police you and making sure that you're doing things in a way that is correct and not, violating any of the rules that we know would come as being helpful. And so we'll talk about the ethics process a little bit more in detail later. After you have ethical approval, the next thing is to recruit your sample and figure out who you're actually going to study in this research and what information you're going to get from them. You then collect that data from that sample. Right? This is your hard measures or your soft measures, which we'll talk a little bit more throughout the course. And then once you have that data, you have to use statistical analyses, whether basic or complex, depending on the design of your study and what you've said in your method, to analyze that data and draw conclusions from it. So your conclusions are really the things that are your inferences. How are you making decisions about what data you've collected and what that's going to mean for your client and your clinical process? And then often what happens is that really just generates new ideas and new questions. Moving on to ethics. So ethics is a branch of philosophy that deals with distinctions between right and wrong and the moral consequences of human actions. Ethical principles govern the conduct of research in physical therapy, but also in all human activities. All of these things are going to include things like informed consent, confidentiality, respect for human rights, and scientific integrity. So let's look into consent a little bit more. Really, people have the ability to say yes or no to research. And it's most important that things are actually voluntary. Right? They have to have knowledge and they have to comprehend that knowledge of the things that you're going to be asking in order to give this voluntary consent. The biggest thing is it has to be freely given. They can't just be persuaded into this, and they have the right to withdraw from research at any time. If we move on to talk about confidentiality, really what this is, it's no different than the confidentiality you experience in a clinical setting. You can't discuss results of research beyond the research team, right? Even if you're involved from a clinical standpoint, you can't get the results from the research if you're not involved in the study. And you have an obligation as a researcher to not disclose information gained in those studies. And again, the participants have the right to withhold any information that they choose not to give you. And how all of this process is managed is through the use of an ethical review board. This is a standing committee at a university, a hospital, or other healthcare facility, and they're charged with ensuring the safety and well-being of human subjects involved in research. The committee is responsible for reviewing the ethical approvals and giving any amendments or changes. They use 3 documents in order to guide this: the Declaration of Helsinki, the International Code of Ethics for Biomedical Research, or Helsinki 2, and in Canada, the Tri-Council Policy Statement for Ethical Conduct of Research Involving